Hey everybody, welcome to the IGDA Las Vegas rebooted chapter, the first chapter meeting for the rebooted Las Vegas thing. My name's Grover, I'm the IGDA Las Vegas chair, and I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank the people of Rob Roy's Innovation Center for hosting this event. We have two speakers tonight. We have Larry Kuperman and Yoshi Tsuchida. And before we introduce them, I want to ask how many of you, show of hands, how many of you guys are members of the IGDA or know what the IGDA is? Okay, well, I want to thank you in particular for helping host this event because your membership helps keep this thing going, and I really appreciate that. For those of you who don't know what the IGDA is, it stands for the International Game Developers Association. It's a nonprofit organization that helps better the lives of game developers and those who want to be a part of the game industry. So yeah, if you want to know more about it or if you want to become a member, please sign up at igda.org. Yeah, and before we call up the speakers, I want to introduce the board that helped make this event possible. So can you guys please come up on stage? Yeah, you go first.
All right, great. Hi guys, I'm Sam Rains. I'm the co-owner of Cosmic Squirrel Studios here in Las Vegas, and I am your treasurer and, what was it called?
Social media coordinator?
Communications director, that was it, yes. All right, so if you have any social media questions, please feel free to ask me.
Hello, everyone. I'm Morgan Lakiotis. I'm on the board as well. I also work with Level Up Expo as their indie game head, so I try to invite people to go showcase their games at the event, and it's a pleasure to be a part of this.
Hi, I'm Connor Torres. Some of you know me already. I run game events quite commonly, Las Vegas Summer Game Jam, Game Developers Gallery, NAB show, and I just became a teacher at a high school for their Game Magnet program. So things have been busy. I can definitely see the game community growing. This is definitely a testament to that. Is that a question or an air high five for my accomplishments? Why, thank you.
What high school would that be?
That would be El Dorado High School. I get all their seniors, and it's going to be a full development lab that they're giving me. And yeah, just a little plug. In a week, I'll be doing a keynote speech on game development and esports at the hospitality meetup. That's on meetup.com. You can check that out. And I have a LinkedIn. So if you want to, as of about 5 days ago, I'm very proud of that. So it's an easy way to get connected. So yeah, my name's Connor Torres. And now I'd like to introduce Gunnar Clovis.
Yeah, hi, if you don't know me already, I'm Gunnar Clovis. I've been making games for pretty much my entire life. I just moved to Vegas from Seattle, Washington, about last December. I worked at a couple of startups there. One was a mid-core game development studio. The other one was a private space project run by Microsoft higher-ups and alums. Since moving here, I've been helping everybody refound the IGDA. I've been working on casino gaming patents, doing consulting work. I'm doing graduate research at the UNLV Big Data Hub. I'm writing a book, and I'm about to start a mobile company next month. We're launching our first few projects. And so before we move on, yeah, I'd like to thank Innevation Switch and Rob Roy again for hosting us. I genuinely believe this is the nicest building in Las Vegas, and I was really, really happy that they're hosting us. So big shout out to them. And now I'd like to introduce, no offense to all you guys, but I think one of the coolest people in the room, my dear friend, Larry Kuperman.
So cool. My bio is actually going to be part of the presentation, so let's get down to it. How many people in here are students? And how many people have taken classes in game programming? How many people, men's and men's, right? How many people have taken classes in graphic design for games? Anything visual? Anybody? How many people have taken classes in the business of games? So we got one guy here. That's one more than I expected. So for the rest of you, you're not planning on getting paid? Okay. Well, we're gonna fix that lack of training on business, the business side of games. First of all, let me tell you who I am, what I've been doing. 2001, I stumbled into a job at Stardock Systems. as the head of sales and business for them. During the time that I was at Stardock, we launched Galciv 1, Galciv 2, Sins of a Solar Empire, Demigod, Elemental, the Political Machine series of games, which were kind of on the border between mainstream and casual. Stardock just launched Star Control Origins today, so despite the fact that I worked there for all those years, they're still in business. After leaving Stardock, we had built up a division. I was saying this earlier. We built up a division that was essentially a Steam competitor called Impulse that was sold to GameStop. I joined GameStop for the longest 2 years of my life. I worked at GameStop in charge of their PC digital sales. In 2013, I got back into working for an indie. I wanted to go back into working for a company that was content focused, that actually made stuff. So I've been the director of business development for Nightdive Studios for the past 5 years and change. We've published over 100 titles on Steam, GOG, Xbox One, including System Shock and the Turok games. And we're just starting down the path to port our games over to the Switch. So I refer to this slide as my being star of stage, screen, and podcast. I've been out there doing a lot of this stuff for a long time. So on the second picture, that was actually an interview that was done for Intel TV, was done at GDC. The young man next to me is Steve Kick, the CEO and founder of Nightdive Studios. And that brings me to a really great point, a really great anecdote. Right before we went on to that interview, I told Steve I said, pro tip, turn your phone off. And he did. I, on the other hand, got up to that screen that said, "Are you sure?" And I ignored it. So my phone went off several times during the interview, which is a segue to a request that I have. Would all of you please take out your phones if you haven't done so and turn them to either off or silent mode? Thanks. Sneaky the way I approach that. So that's what I do, and I've been in this industry for about 16 years now. I always ask people to tell the story of how they first got into the games industry. I'll tell you mine. So I lived in Michigan until 3 months ago. In December of 2000, I got a newsletter from a company called Stardock that said, Stardock Systems, located in beautiful Livonia, Michigan, is seeking a sales manager. Come work for Stardock Studios, where it's always sunny and 72 degrees. That was December in Michigan. I don't know if you've ever been to Michigan in December, but sunny and 72 degrees are not the words that I would use to describe that. So I wrote back, saying clearly there was a reality disconnect on that. But I wrote back, a snarky email, and they asked me to come in. And I came in for the job. I had just accepted another position. So I showed up at Stardock wearing a suit, tie, dress shirt. That was not the way the people at Stardock were dressed, but they let me in the door anyway, and we started to talk. They had a software division, and they were looking for somebody to take over sales of the software, to move it from a consumer product to an enterprise level, and that I could do. During the time that I worked there, we brought on clients, most of which I managed, that included Microsoft, Dell, HP, General Electric. So we had this thriving software industry. They also mentioned kind of peripherally that there was this game division, and that was going to end up being my primary focus for the next 11 years. So we started off finding publishers for the games, and I was really lucky. The first publisher that I found for a game called The Corporate Machine was Take-Two. I would go on and we'd sell games to publishers that included Ubisoft. When we opened up the Impulse line, I managed relationships with every game publisher from Activision to ZeniMax, as I was wont to say. So at one time or another, I managed over 600 publisher accounts for a total of 1,600 games. So let me tell you why you should care about this stuff, why this is relevant to you. So if you want game development to be a career and not just a hobby, if you want to be happy in the business, money does not make you happy. Money is not a satisfier. The lack of money, however, is a dissatisfier for people. When you go down the forums, the primary complaint that you will see among people who are working on game development is the disconnect between how hard they work and how much they get compensated for it. We fail to ask the questions, how do we expect our games to generate money? How much money should we expect? Where will we sell them and what will we sell? So I saw this cartoon. Does that resonate with anybody? Does that seem real? I mean, the people on Steam that post comments about our games, they're all loving and caring, right? Okay, so what's the problem here? I mean, I'm not trying to take this too seriously, but what's the problem here? He tried to set the compensation method depending on how hard he worked, rather than the other way around, rather than figuring out how much money he was likely to make and judging how hard he was going to work based on that. How much content should we put into a game? We'll talk more about that. But that's part of what a biz dev person does. It's scary out there. I mean, these are a couple of months old, some of the studio closures, right? You guys know that this week Capcom Vancouver went under, 150 developers were laid off, right? I mean, that's scary. So how do you get around that? Well, real easy. Just make the next Fortnite. What's the problem? How about the next PUBG? I in particular, I always use Stardew Valley as a game example. I really like that game, and I'll go through the reasons for it. But aside from the playing of the game, the reason I always use Stardew Valley is because Stardew Valley is a game success that would not have been made if it wasn't for today's current architecture. So the business of games is maybe 60 years old. I mean, that's really not like a whole big period of time. There is no reason that you can't know everything about the history of game development. I mentioned some people before. So recently I was named GameAdvocacy.org. Let me back up. The head of GameAdvocacy.org was saying that one of the problems that we run into in this industry is ageism, right? You get over a certain age and you can't be involved in the gaming world, right? I see a couple of people that would probably agree with me about that there is a certain amount of prejudice. Anyway, Kate came up with a list of the 50 most influential people over the age of 50. And she published that, and I was happy to see that I was on that list. I was on a list with certain luminaries: John Romero, Warren Spector. So Warren's a friend of mine. He actually worked on the original System Shock games. That aside, when we were talking about it afterwards, the first thing when I said that I was on that list, one of my buddies said to me, "It only proves one thing, that you're old." I said, no. It proves two things. I'm old and I'm not dead, which I'm always glad about, because that's a different list. But some of the people that founded, some of the people on that list included Nolan Bushnell. Nolan Bushnell started a company called Atari. Had the list come out a little bit earlier because it's fairly recently. Ted Dabney just passed away. So Ted Dabney wrote a game called Pong, right? It's hard to believe, but those games revolutionized they started the industry. I was a teenager in New York. I don't know, how many people here have been to New York? So the distance between Queens and the Bronx is, pretty far. We got together, like 6 of us, we piled into a car, and we drove from the Bronx out to Queens because there was a bar out there that had this machine where you could play this game Pong. That was how cool it was. It was the first video game that we played. That said, it's a limited history. It's a finite history. It hasn't taken that long. So you should really know everything about it if you're going to make a living out of being in the gaming industry. I like this slide a lot. Ideas aren't enough. I actually know Mark, who's quoting this. I'll tell you why I found this particularly interesting. I didn't get this out of a gaming journal. I actually got this out of Forbes magazine, that they were talking about how games are made. Games today, the gaming industry totaled something like $117 billion last year. The gaming industry is big enough that Forbes is really interested in it. Mark went on after this quote, he said, to be clear, he says, all games start with an idea. But to be clear, when I'm saying idea, I'm not talking about a high-level concept. I'm talking about an implementation-ready idea, which is ready to be coded and integrated with a project or ready to be spun into a prototype. It's not, let's do Robo-Sharks invade Ireland. That's a great idea right there. It's knowing how you'd want the Robo-Sharks animated, how you'd model them, how you deal with procedural destruction of the robotic components. It's understanding the story beats and the gameplay loop and being able to generate a deep design doc exploring that and some of the other options. So, when they poll college students that are getting ready to go into the gaming industry and they ask them, what do they want to do? They say, I want to come up with great ideas for games. Well, ideas don't pay the rent. Let me put it another way. Does everybody know this? It's from South Park, the Underpants Gnomes, right? Phase 1 is you collect the underpants. Phase 3 is profit. Now, all we need is phase 2, right? This happens a lot. And what I'm trying to get at for you is that the business model of game development is important as any other aspect of it and should be part of your game's design document. So businesses today need people that can navigate change. I say this kind of humorously, but in 2001, when I started in this industry, if somebody said, I know how to make $1 billion from a game, we would have been like all ears. $1 billion? How are you going to make $1 billion from a game? Well, we'll give the game away. You know what? We'll make the game free to play. Could you rewind that for me? And we'll sell stuff that'll go in the game, like swords and tiaras and stuff. No thanks. We'll see you outside, Nobody would have thought that free to play would have been a thing, right? That's not the way we did business. So we need people in the industry that are visionary, that think about what the future is going to be like. The stuff that you are doing now, you won't be doing in 10 years. It'll be programmatically different, it'll be artistically different, and it'll be economically different. So VR, AR. How do you monetize that? Should you be investing in Magic Leap? What should you be looking at? I don't know the answers to those, but I know that every business needs to ask those questions, and they need somebody who's dedicated to answering them. So, okay, what does a biz dev guy do? Biz dev is the one that's gonna answer those questions. So I'll tell you what I do on a daily basis. I report to the CEO and the CFO. I coordinate with the company's lawyers. When I tell people that I work in the gaming industry and I work from home, they're like, oh, you stay home and play video games all day. Part of it, yeah. The better part of it, but I do a lot of stuff with contracts. From the first deal that I made with Take-Two, I was handed the contract and told to read it and redline that. I was like, don't our lawyers do this? No. When you're done with the negotiation, when you're up to founders, then you send it over to the lawyer for final approval. That's the way most of the game companies work today. Who here has started their own company? Do you have a full-time lawyer on staff? I'm shocked. So no meetings with guys in suits, right? That doesn't happen that often. Okay, that said, I mean, that's part of the job. But you also do a lot of stuff internally. You work with game producers and directors. You work with the art directors. You do strategy meetings. You coordinate with marketing and community managers. You ensure that all of the people have the tools that they want. So things that come up, on a typical day, we might need to expand the number of users that we have on our Git repository, right? So somebody's got to look at what the licensing is and deal with that. Well, you don't have the developers do that. That's a biz dev function. You might also find out that you're running into compatibility issues with certain AMD cards. And I will probably at least once, if I talk about this, refer to them as ATI. But you find out that your game runs fine on NVIDIA, but not so much on AMD. And you need to get cards to troubleshoot that. Who's responsible for that? All right, NVIDIA just launched the, whatever it was, the RTX 2000 R2D2 C3PO card, whatever it was today, right? You find out that the game that you did that ran fine last week, all of a sudden doesn't run on the hot new video card. Somebody's got to do those kind of liaison stuff. So those are the kind of the inward facing stuff. You're getting the requests from the people on your team. I need this, I need that. Then you do the outward facing stuff. Coordinate with the platforms. If you're doing mobile, that's Google and Apple. If you're doing PC, it's Steam, GOG, all of the others. If you're doing Xbox, somebody's got to talk to those guys, PlayStation, etc. You do the publisher relations if you're working on that. Activision, EA, those guys. You do the media stuff. Polygon, Kotaku, PC Gamer. I at least do that. I'm really good at that. That's part of my skill set. I manage those relationships, handle the message. You do the interviews. You attend industry events. Let me also just tell you, de-romanticize this. Let me tell you what, for the past 3 years, my GDC schedule has been, we do GDC every year. My GDC schedule has been between 17 and 20 meetings in the same hotel room across 3 days. You find yourself when you come home with your face hurting from smiling. The times that you go out for dinner, you're not eating dinner alone, nor you usually have one team dinner. That's usually like the Monday night or the Friday after the show. But the rest of the time you're going out with clients, and again, you have that smile face on. So you do those things. Gamescom, has anybody ever been out to Gamescom? If you think E3 is big, right? Gamescom, 7 buildings. You know what happened to me the first time I went to Gamescom? I ended up in the right building. I ended up in the right location in the wrong building. Gamescom is in Cologne, Germany. So my German is eine kleine, and I'm trying to find my way back. True story, though, the first Gamescom I attended as part of GameStop. And if you want to find out how glamorous biz dev is, somebody had to cut the sticky tape, the Velcro tape, and put that on the walls to be able to hang the posters. That was me. I was the only guy doing it. We had no tools. So I social engineered the Velcro tape from one of the guys there, which involved a lot of begging and groveling. Got a ladder. I don't know who the ladder belonged to, but for the next hour and change, it belonged to me. And with an X-Acto knife, I'm cutting the stuff and putting it on there. So true story. That's the kind of stuff, somebody's got to make those arrangements. And very often those kind of detail things devolve onto the biz dev guy. And then developer relations, work with Unity, Unreal, NVIDIA, all of those guys. So there's a skill set for going into business development. Be a generalist. I'm also going to tell you, be a generalist in everything that you do. Learn more than one thing so that if they don't need what you do, but they need something else at a company that you want to work for, you'll get the job. The more things you know how to do, the more employable you are. You need good communication skills, written and verbal. You need presentation skills. You have to be comfortable speaking with people. You know how you define an extroverted computer programmer? He looks at your shoes when he talks to you. So, seriously, right? We're an industry of people that would rather be, on Discord, or IRC. We've got some devs in my place that would, most happily be on IRC. So somebody's got to be outward facing, and that's one of the things that biz dev does. You need to do contact management. You need to have a certain amount of psychology and active listening. You need a background in accounting and finance. And you need to be an active reader. Read everything you can. At the end, I'm gonna give you some links on that. Okay. One of the things I'm also gonna tell you is to be successful, and one of the ways that you can be successful in any industry is to become an expert. If you're taking notes, you wanna write that down, become an expert. And I'm gonna tell you how to become an expert on my last slide. But let's go over the history of business development and how the industry has changed and how the business side of it has changed. So in the old days, there were console games. There was the personal computer. There was physical media. Everything was sold at retail or through the mall. There was shareware. And we'll talk about some of that stuff. There's a lot more diversity today. Console games, PC games, mobile games, browser. Retail is shrinking. Digital is growing. Free to play, in-app purchases, ad-supported, social media. At one time, this is what gaming looked like. Magnavox Odyssey, 1972. Atari 2600, 1977. NES, SNES, Game Boy handheld, PlayStation, Xbox launches. They were all sold on physical media. Why do I keep on emphasizing that physical media? So where did you go to get physical media? Where did you go to get your cartridges? Well, you went to a GameStop. You went to Babbage's, which GameStop ate. Right. Egghead software, right? You went to a store to buy those things. How did the games get to the store? Rewind it back to me, right? You're coding this thing on some sort of machine, and at the end of it, somebody buys a console game, a cartridge in a box, right? How did it get there? Well, you made a deal with somebody who had a factory that made the consoles. And they not only made the consoles, not only made the cartridges, you had to make another deal maybe with the guys that made the boxes. You had to print up the manuals. If you really want to go old school, there was a time when you had to put in the code that was written on a certain page. There was a spinner for one of the games that you had to spin around that unlocked the game to prevent piracy. That was kind of cool stuff. It never worked very well, but there you go. But you had to do all of that stuff. It was all done on physical media. As an individual developer, there was no way that you were going to make cartridges for the Atari, make the boxes, right? That just was not happening. So if this was the only way, if this hadn't changed, if this was the only way that we got games today, there would be no indie development community. And I pointed out games like Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley, I don't think anyone saw that becoming a hit. It's moving to console now, right? If it's not out already, I know it's been in the news on that. Nobody believed in Stardew Valley. When you pitched the game, it didn't seem to make sense, right? But it works, right? However, it would never have seen the light of day because in order to get your game through there, you had to sell it to people who were not gamers. You had to sell it to people who were purely business driven. True story for you, and I know I'm giving you a lot of anecdotes. We went down to Dell Computer. We were talking about putting our games on Dell PCs. There were 3 women that ran the gaming division for Dell. One of the women said to me with an absolutely straight face, "You know what kind of game I like? I like that game that you find on the computers, that solitaire game. Can you make that game for me?" And I'm like, folding up my presentation, putting it back, and we'd flown down to Texas. It was like, game over, man, game over. All right, so this was all on physical media. And that dictated the way that you did business then. Today, going to the console world, it's still a walled garden, right? How many people develop for consoles here? Anybody develop for Switch? Xbox? What do we got? PlayStation? Where'd you get your dev kit from?
I shook a hand at GDC.
Good for you, man. Was that which one was that for? Which console was that for? PS4. You still that hand had to belong to somebody at Sony. There is only one place that you get the consoles from, and that is from the people that own the garden. Until recently, and I mean like the last 6 months, there was a struggle for indies to get dev kits for the Switch. You were like, but I make this really cool game. It sold a gazillion copies on PC. They're like, You had to go through them, and it still is that way. You need certain approvals to get the dev kits. The marketing is still controlled by them. There are things that you're not going to see. You're not going to see certain ratings for games on the because they don't want you to do that. As opposed to PC, your PC dev kit kind of comes with the PC, right? In the past, console games were 100% retail. Now, led by DLC, content is moving to digital. Let me tell you about how that digital revolution took place, and it really was because of DLC. The reason that they started to do that was because somebody in biz dev asked the question, after they buy the game, what else can I sell them? And the guy that said, hey, you know that second campaign you were thinking about adding? Don't add it right away. That was just brilliant, okay? But that kind of started the revolution. And the transition to digital creates opportunities for indies. Polygon, August 30th. Nintendo Switch eShop dominated by 90s throwbacks this week. Slash Gear, September 13th. Nintendo Switch weekly eShop update, Indie Mania. So that was the console world. Another part of the world is the PC game world. I got some stories about the PC game world. IBM introduced the personal computer in 1981. You know what they called the first personal computer? PC. It was the IBM PC. No ego there, right? Microsoft Flight Simulator is released as the definitive game. The reason for that is IBM told Bill Gates, hey, we've got a hardware advantage over these Apple guys. Go out and find me something that'll show off that advantage. So Bill goes out and buys a flight simulator game, and it gets rebranded as Microsoft Flight Simulator. By 1987, the PC was the largest gaming platform. 1990, Carmack and Romero made Commander Keen. There's a story about how they made Commander Keen. I've got Dangerous Dave in a copyright infringement up there. So Carmack Romero and another Carmack, unrelated, Adrian Carmack, working for a company in Louisiana called Soft Disk. Soft Disk business model is they do a shareware magazine. This is like so far in your past, it's like I might as well be talking about dinosaurs. So if you subscribe to Soft Disk, once a month, you get this disk. You get a floppy disk. No CDs, because we didn't have those quite yet. You get a floppy disk that had all of these shareware games. It might have like the first 3 levels. It might time out after 15 minutes. You guys know what shareware is. At least you get the concept. Romero gets hired by the company, and he comes up with a revolutionary idea. He says, wait, don't send it out every month. We'll send it out every 2 months, but we'll have better quality stuff. They say to him, well, okay, but you better come up with some better quality stuff for us to have on it. So he starts off and he makes a clone of Super Mario. He knows it's a clone, down to the hidden levels. The graphics have changed. He had his buddy Adrian do the graphics. But it's basically Super Mario down to the hidden levels. He gets a friend who works for Epic Games, who's still at Epic, to take it out to Tokyo and to show it to the guys out there, to the Nintendo guys out there, and to try to get their approval. They think about it and say, you know, we're kind of into selling this hardware stuff, so we'd really rather that our games stay exclusive to our console. So he goes back and he takes Dangerous Dave and IP infringement, and he redoes the art, changes some of the game stuff, and he comes up with Commander Keen. He's made a deal with the guys at Soft Disk. Well, it wasn't so much of a deal. The guys at Soft Disk said, well, you don't actually own the game that you've made. See, you made that game as an employee of ours, so we actually own that game. And in fact, the Commander Keen series and the Dangerous Dave series stayed with Soft Disk as shareware for a long time. But they said, okay, I tell you what, you guys want to go off and start your own company, you can start your own company, but you have an obligation to give us a certain number of titles that we can use for our shareware catalog. They do, they go off, Carmack and Romero go off, and they start their own company, and it's called id. And the first original game that they come out with is Doom. And then they begin the multiplayer revolution really with Quake. Okay, not too shabby. Wolfenstein was the first original. Doom comes later in there. Yeah, thanks. Wolfenstein started things off, and it's funny, all these years later, they're still making Wolfenstein and Doom, right? But they continue on with this whole shareware thing, that you can get part of the game for free, you can try it before you like it, and then if you like it, you unlock it. And one of the things that they did on there was they said, well, we don't want to be dependent on soft disk, so we're actually going to allow you to download it through this thing called the internet. We had the internet by those days because we got it from our AOL disks. Only people my age are going to find that funny, but there you go. 1994, Microsoft adds DirectX to Windows 95. By the way, Doom was the hallmark game that Microsoft did, and there is a fantastic video of Bill Gates wearing a brown jacket announcing Doom in an underground garage at Microsoft. And as he's talking, very theatrically, one of the guys at Microsoft dressed as a Doom demon is sneaking up behind him. Behind the podium, Bill's got a shotgun, pulls it out, and shoots him. That video is actually exists. I would suggest to you that if you want something to read to while away the hours, Masters of Doom would be a great book about how they subverted DirectX to becoming a gaming platform. 1999, Valve releases Counter-Strike and introduces the Steam client to make digital updates. So the Steam client did not originally start off as a store. It originally started off as a way of doing updates. The other thing was that before Steam, you had to manually type in the IP addresses of your friends to connect with them. Doom could be played across LAN, but if you wanted to play Counter-Strike, you had to go in and, you had to know the IP address, and Steam allowed you to browse for servers. So, okay, Steam. So it's an open environment. It's relatively easy to get your games on there. As you can see, I had crossed out Greenlight and wrote in Steam Direct. You pay your money, and there you go. Windows, Mac, Linux supported. In the United States, retail sales of PC games are effectively gone. If you walk into GameStop and you go looking for the PC game department, it's somewhere in the back near the toilets, covered in dust and spiders and stuff like that. Steam sales were estimated in 2017 as $4.3 billion. How much money does Steam keep from that? That comes out to about $1.7 billion, something like that, 1.8, somewhere in that range. Not too shabby. Have anybody here been to the Valve building? So you think it's going to be a lot cooler than it is? It's actually like 2-3 floors in a regular office building in downtown Seattle. And they don't spend a whole lot of money on frippery. It is a nice building, and it's got a nice cafeteria, but it's not what you would think. It's not like the Emerald City in Wizard of Oz or anything. So there are other stores coming up. Discord's recently announced a store. PC, why do people do PC game? Low barriers, easy entry, free tools. Single biggest complaint about PC games, why don't we all make PC games? Discovery, right? Your game is among 6,000 on Steam, right? All right, mobile games, iOS and Android platforms, Apple, Google, Amazon, other stores. 34% of all gamers worldwide only play mobile games. There may pass to modernization, but it's really hard to be discovered again, right? You can do direct sales, you can do free to play, you can do in-game items, ad-supported, there's all kinds of hybrid models. Am I missing anything here on the mobile game side? I quote from Super Data a lot, and at the end of it, I'll provide a link for Super Data. They are a really good site to get your statistics from. That's probably going to go away. They were just bought by Nielsen. Browser-based games. That's not like such a big thing in America, but it is in other places. Why isn't it such a big thing in America? Because we own our own computers, right? There are a lot of other places that people go to where the majority of gaming is being done through internet cafes. So if you're playing a browser-based game, you don't need to have anything other than your login credentials. Drakensang Online. This is an old statistic. According to Big Point, there are 35 million registered accounts, probably for among 6 people, but okay. But there you go. It's it's a freemium game, and it's one of the bigger ones, and it's out there. Why am I telling you about this? It's something that you guys might consider because there isn't a whole lot of competition these days in browser-based games, and there are still a lot of people that play them. So, for how many people does this resonate with? Okay, let me tell you something about Club Penguin. As embarrassing as it might be, you're blushing. As embarrassing as having grown up playing Club Penguin or having been part of the Club Penguin community might be, it was developed by New Horizon Interactive, a studio that Disney bought for $350 million. I don't know about you, but I'm not saying I'd sell my soul for $350 million, but I at least entertain the offer, okay? So that's interesting stuff. When I come to this, I always do the show me the money part of it. Most people do not know what the top selling games are, and that is a shame if you do not know that, because if you don't know what those games are, then how are you ever going to get there? A little bit of trivia for you. This is probably akin to the mobile gaming stuff. I had asked my audience in Ann Arbor this. Nigeria, the country of Nigeria in Africa, is the 5th largest growing internet economy in the world. So, what games sell in Nigeria? So there are actually 2 games that do really well there. One is a game that is a mosquito hunter game. It is essentially an Angry Birds clone, except instead of that, you're killing mosquitoes. But there you go, it is a mosquito. The other one is a traffic driving game where you drive through the streets of Lagos. Okay, listen, I'm not telling you necessarily that you need to move to Nigeria and make games, all right? But there's like a gazillion people in America that are out there making games, right? And there probably aren't that many in, find a niche for yourself. Okay. Some of the games on here are games that you may never have heard of. Dungeon Fighter Online, that resonate? Where's that big? Yeah. There are whole markets out there. When you talk about a company like NCSoft, right, that, Guild Wars, among other titles that they've done, they're still selling Lineage. It's like every person in Korea owns 4 copies of that. Try to explain to somebody who isn't in the gaming world the StarCraft phenomenon. When was the last time they did a major update to StarCraft? They're still milking that thing. Okay, all right, just pointing that out. I mean, those are ways that you can get rich with, low effort. Most of these games are games that you know, but there are quite a few titles that you don't know on here. When I talk about the top 10 game companies, it's almost always shocking to my audience that the largest game company in the world is Tencent. Tencent, Tencent. All that they do is they own the market of, what's that country called? China. So Tencent started out as a telecom provider, and they have connections to the government. All the games in China have to be approved by the government. Recently, the government put a freeze on new games. It was like within 3 or 4 months. They said, no, we're not approving any games. Tencent lost $150 billion in a period of a couple of weeks over that. But working with Tencent is like a money faucet. When they start pushing a game through their network, it's like just turning the water on. It just flows. So Tencent's revenue, don't encourage me. Tencent's revenue is about 4 times that of Activision. The thing that's also amazing about Tencent is that some of the companies on here, Sony, Apple, Microsoft on here, they're also selling hardware. By the way, don't strain your eyes. Any of this stuff, I actually have posted a copy of this, so you're free to download it. Also, all of the stats that I'm giving you come from Super Data. So, you know, there are companies out there that are selling the Xbox hardware. That goes into the revenue numbers. It's a high revenue number, low profit number, all right? But Tencent is just selling software. And in fact, they're not even selling software. Basically, everything that Tencent does is free to play. And it's all played out of internet cafes. Something you really, really want to know. Anytime somebody generates billions of dollars, they get on my radar. So in the old days in development, you built your own game engine. That was step one. Or you might license one. There was the idTech or Doom engine. Strife used that. It's one of the games I publish. There was a LithTech engine. No One Lives Forever, Fear. And then there was the Unreal engine. That company, Epic, seems to have done okay. Today you have Unreal, Unity, CryEngine, Lumberyard. Why do I put this in as a business thing? Let me read you the terms of service. Everybody know what Lumberyard is? Okay, so Amazon licensed part of the Crytek engine, the old CryEngine. So Crytek has largely gone out of business. There's a whole backstory about that. I'll be happy to tell you afterwards. But they licensed part of that engine. But here's what Lumberyard gives you, and this is directly from their site. Amazon Lumberyard is a free, cross-platform 3D game engine for you to create the highest quality games. Connect your games to the vast computer and storage of the AWS cloud, and engage fans on Twitch. By starting game projects with Lumberyard, you can spend more time creating great gameplay and building communities of fans, and less time doing the development work. So basically they're saying, hey, we'll give you the engine for free, kid, because you're going to be tied into our back end. Some games that use Lumberyard, some games that use the AWS engine. Anybody know who uses who uses the AWS back end? We'll come up to Star Citizen in a minute. I've got that one covered. The first game that's on there that uses AWS is Fortnite. Recently, PUBG made headlines by switching. They had been on AWS, and they switched to the Azure cloud. Who owns the Azure cloud? Microsoft. How do you think that deal happened? I picture just wheelbarrows full of money. Okay, so that's why I'm saying to you, it sounds like an engine thing is a technical decision, but there's a business implication that goes with it. All right. So financing, people still do this, but in the old days, how did you get the money to make your game? Well, you worked 2 jobs, you had a long development cycle, or you could find a publisher. Finding a publisher meant giving up control, and getting paid was an issue. First major success that I had as head of business development for Stardock, we sold Galactic Civilizations 1 to Strategy First. Strategy First estimated that they sold about 60,000 copies at retail. They paid us for about 10,000 copies of those, and then they went into bankruptcy. If you steal 25 cents, you go to prison. If you steal $250,000, you go to court. Thank you very much for playing. So that was the oldest. And I talked to you about retail. I'm going to throw something out that you guys, it's completely outside of your experience. But MDF, Marketing Development Funds. You ever see any of those movies about organized crime? And the guy comes into a store and says, you know, you got a real nice game development studio here. It would be a shame if something happened to it. That's essentially what marketing development funds are. When you go into a retail store, when you go into Best Buy, for example, and you walk in there and there are these big banners advertising a new product from Samsung or LG, when you go in there and they're pushing a console, that didn't happen randomly. They were paid to do those things. The major hardware makers today pay marketing development funds to stores for featured promotion. Back in the old days when PC games were sold in stores, when console games were sold in stores, there was a thing called end caps. You had rows of stuff, but then at the end of it, you had a smaller rack that was perpendicular to the long racks that had the featured games. And your attention went there. If your stuff was in an end cap, you sold more, or at least you hoped you did. You had to pay for the privilege of being there. That was the old days of gaming. You don't pay to be featured on Steam today. I mean, I can tell you that. You don't pay to be featured on Xbox or Microsoft. You can't. They just decide whether to feature you or not. We had 2 games that shipped fairly recently, Turok 2 and Forsaken. Both of them were titles from the old days. My company does. We do remasters, updates, refurbishing of classic PC games. These 2 games were very similar in pedigree. I don't want to say identical, but they were very similar in pedigree. The first game, Microsoft really liked that. They thought it was really cool, classic games coming to the Xbox platform. They featured that game streaming on both Xbox.com and ID at Xbox.com. The difference in sales that having that marketing support made on day one was tremendous, and it continued through the life of the game. Because when you get that initial bump in sales, then you start appearing in other places. You start appearing on top 10 lists. Being on a top 10 list means you sell more. You got there by selling more, and you continue to sell more. It's one of those positive feedback things. Okay, so those were the old days. Today, you can self-publish. Publishers are still important. They are. I mean, come on. If EA said they were going to pick up one of your titles, you'd be all right with that. Retail had a high upfront cost. Manufacturing, you were dependency on the stores. Today, you can kind of get around that. You don't need. I don't sell anything at retail. I'm not interested in selling anything at retail. It's purely a digital economy for us. Venture capital. Venture capital is getting more and more attracted to games. If you guys aren't thinking about pitching, if you're starting your own company, this is a little bit far off for you guys that are still students. But if you're working on developing your own game now and you're not thinking about pitching it to somebody with money, you're missing a bet. There are companies that are looking to invest in you. One of the things that they will ask you is what's your exit strategy, because they're not interested in investing in you for the sake of, oh, this is a cool game. I should give you all this money so you'll be able to make it. They're interested in, well, what are you going to sell your company for at the end of that time? Okay. Mention Tencent. Tencent is part owner of both PUBG and Fortnite. It's good to be Tencent. So there are incubators, and then there's crowdfunding. Right? Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Fig. Anyone know the difference between Fig and Kickstarter? Yep. So on Kickstarter, you're selling your game. You're pre-selling it, but you're selling your game. You're selling what other swag you've got. In Fig, you're selling part of your company. So why do I know about this stuff? This is from 2016. Nightdive Studios raised $1.35 million. We were the 4th largest crowdsourcing event in 2016. Indiegogo is a fine site also. Fig is a fine site. They're different business models. So, $1.35 million sounds like a lot of money, but I'm going to ask you, how much money can you raise through crowdfunding? So, yeah. So Star, and this was 2017. I mean, I can't keep dating it. Star Citizen is basically worth more than some countries. So it's the most funds ever raised. It's a non-traditional model. There's no publisher. They're doing it themselves. They're using Amazon Lumberyard. By the way, they got sued by the Crytek guys because they had done a deal with Crytek that said that they would promote the Cry engine, and they switched over and they moved to Amazon Lumberyard. And my heart doesn't bleed for them for whatever $200 million that they've got now. They can afford lawyers. So I don't know. Will Star Citizen be a failure, a hoax, or the start of something new? I don't know. There are more options for developers today. There are more platforms, engines, financial, and funding models. The barriers are getting lower all the time. People want you to make games. What should you do? Network, meet up. get involved in the industry, attend game jams and hackathons, build your portfolio. Most important of all, make something. I told you that I would tell you how to become an expert, and I'm going to tell you that now. Don't leave. I'm up to the good part. So how do you become an expert? There are two qualities that an expert has. An expert knows things, and then an expert shares that knowledge. If you've had success in the game industry, and perhaps more importantly, if you've had failures, then you know things. What you need is a venue where you can share that knowledge, a safe venue where you can speak among friends, but with a big audience. Venue like IGDA of Las Vegas. So these are the resources, and thank you very much. I'll be here all evening, and I've also got some business cards if people want to connect with me. Yeah. Questions, comments?
Questions, come on up here.
On this side as well?
Okay, we got people coming.
Yeah, you're all, go ahead. Either way. Come on,
My name
Link.
is Sam Fishback, and I've been kind of limited lately with my computer resources. So I was wondering if anyone knows any development opportunities on mobile. Can I build a game just from my phone?
If you scale back your expectations, then yes, then you can start to look at things like Twine or some of the other engines. Basically, you're going to want to look at something that's more web-based. I'm not sure if Construct has something like that, but there are a few options.
Well,
But HTML-based is what you're going to want.
the first question is what type of game are you looking to develop?
At this point, I'm just looking to gain the practice, kind of gain the knowledge of
What's
programming.
the text-based one for the novel?
Yeah, that's
Is it
fine.
Twine? There's another one though, isn't there? Novella. I guess it's a Twine competitor. Yeah. I mean, you could do something along those lines. If you're looking to do an MMO, probably not.
Right.
Yep.
Hello, I'm Mark. I'm 17. I just got out of high school, and I'm looking to join the game industry, like as an intern or something like that. How do I go about that? What should I expect to make, if anything at all?
So the first thing I would tell you is you've already started it, and attend as many things like this as you can. Thanks. Participate in every game jam that you can. And every time you do it, no matter what you do, write down what you've accomplished. Write down the thing you got. I skipped over something. My education. It was on the slide. It's not like a bragging point. I have my bachelor's of science from New York University. I have my MBA from Detroit Mercy. I was the only student that graduated from the MBA program with a 4.0. I was inducted into the National Business Honor Society. I'm not telling you all that. Well, the punchline to that is I have never gotten a job from any of them. What I have gotten a job from is that I go in with a resume that says these are the things that I have done. So you need to build up your resume on that. You need to build up the things that you've done. Game jams are the #1 place to do this. You will usually work on teams, and you'll work with people that are more experienced than you are. Make those connections and stay within the community. There is an enormous community in gaming, and everybody knows everybody else. So build up those connections. It's the best way to get started. In terms of internships, apply to every company that you can, but they're going to be more interested when you go in there with a portfolio of work and you can show them what you've done. So, go to those game jams and say, hey, I'm one of the 4 people that created this thing. Cool? Thank you. Sure. Anybody else?
One more question.
Oh, one more question.
Yeah.
So I was curious on during the production of a game, how do you decide on the price point, especially like from a designer's perspective? Because as you're designing the game, you also want to know like who's gonna pay for this game that I'm designing, and like the mechanics, like how interesting will it be, and how much can I charge?
So a couple of things on that. First of all, the way that you solve problems that aren't solvable, that you don't know the answer to, is find comparables. Find a game that's out there like what you're expecting to make, and price yours similarly to that. That's a fairly good way to do that. There are other equations that you can use, and it again depends on the platform that you're on, but typically it's the amount of gameplay that people can expect in a game will determine the price point. That's the model that we use in PC stuff. And that's for single player only. Again, multiplayer has different elements to it. But what I would suggest to you is always find a comparable. Find something that mine is like this, or I expect my finished product to be like that. There is almost nothing new in gaming. That's probably a controversial statement, but everything is similar to something else. So look at what those things are. That model doesn't always work. And most of the lessons that I've learned, the ones that really stick with me, didn't come from my successes, they came from my failures. So we launched a game, Forsaken, fairly recently. It's a great game. It's really cool. It's an old 90s style acclaimed game. You're it's kind of similar to Descent. It's a 6 degrees of freedom game. You're on motorbikes in an underground maze, blah, blah, blah. It's a retro game, and it's a relaunch. We felt that a $20 price point was right. We had launched 2 other games that were at that $20 price point. We came out the same week as Yakuza 0, which was also $20. They could have just punched me in the nose. It would have been faster. So I mean, those things happen. That said, we'll still make our. I still feel it was priced right. One of the other lessons that I tell people all the time is you can do your game at $20 and then put it on a permanent sale for $10. You can't sell your game for $10 and then say, I made a mistake. I'm really going to sell this for $20 now. You can't do that. So you can always go down. You can't go up. But that's the answer to the pricing model. It's one of the dilemmas in the gaming industry. Any other questions? Cool. Yoshi Tsuchida, first independent game developer in this area. You're a legend, man.
Hello, is this on? All right. Hi everyone. My name is Yoshiha Tsuchida, or Yoshi for short. I'm gonna be giving a topic on how my team, EQStudios, we made our very first game from zero experience at all in the gaming industry. Starting from zero. I'm gonna start off by kind of introducing myself and my students a bit, just to give you guys kind of an idea where we come from. So I'm right now 22 years old. The level designer and music composer for the studio. I did not go to college. I kind of jumped into this when I was about 18 years old. And yeah, the only game I have that I developed is the Painscreek Killings. So EQStudios was originally a 3-man freelancing team. They were contracted to make advertisements in CG for other companies. And after some time from hopping from job to job, they kind of decided that they wanted to make their own IP, basically their own intellectual property. And that's when I was kind of approached. I was asked, hey, do you want to make a game? It's going to take a year of development. I know you want to go to college. And that was still on my agenda at the time. I wanted to go to college. I was 18 years old back then. And I was kind of stoked. I thought, wow, at 19 years old, I'll have my first commercial product. 4 years later, we released the Painscreek Killings, which is EQStudios' very first game. Right now, it's sitting. We have 97% positive reviews. We're working with a publisher called Meridian 4. And yeah, this talk is going to be kind of like the process of us from kind of where I mentioned to how do we get to this point. And I just wanted to just clarify to just clear the air that I'm only speaking from my experience. This is not like a formula of how to get to where we are. It's merely just me trying to share my experience, and hopefully you guys can get something out of it. We wanted to rewind 4 years back, and we told ourselves we wanted to make a game. Like, great. So where do we start? And the first thing that we asked ourselves was, what game can you make? Unfortunately, the question is not necessarily what game would you like to make, as was the case for us. Like, before you can make your sci-fi fantasy of blasting aliens through space, you might have to make a Flappy Bird knockoff. And that's kind of, in order to answer the question, what game can we make, we had to kind of look at our strength and our limitations. So coming from a background of when I first started working with EQStudios, I only had like a hobbyist level in 3D modeling and music production. That's about it. So in other words, the whole team, including me, we were decent in creating 3D assets, hobbyist level. A couple of the people there had some foundation in screenwriting. They were able to write pretty decent stories. And we took a look at also our limitations, what we lacked in. None of us were artists. None of us, we didn't have a concept artist. None of us were programmers. Very big red flag, by the way. Yes. None of us knew how to code. We didn't know how to make multiplayer games. We didn't know how to work with servers. NPCs, we didn't know how to program them. We weren't really confident in doing rigging and animating and doing voice acting if necessary. And we have no experience in working with other game engines. And from there, we realized right off the bat that the types of games that we could make was very, very limited. And this is something I guess we had to come to terms with, that, okay, what game can we actually make? And this is something I think that's very important for people to kind of understand, because game development is a very time-consuming, lengthy, and very enduring process. And I think it's very important to know where you stand before you jump into a project. And yes, so we decided that considering our limitations and considering our strengths, we decided to go with a walking simulator kind of model for our game. Games like Firewatch, Vanishing of Ethan Carter, Gone Home, those were kind of models that we thought, hey, we can make something like this. It might be challenging. We don't know where exactly to start from, but this is an idea for a direction that we can go with our first game. And so one thing I also want to talk about limitations is that when looking at our skills, we could easily make, I don't know if you guys know the game Dear Esther. That's one of the very oldest walking simulators. And we could have made something very similar. You just walk, you see pretty graphics, hear someone giving a short story, and you reach the end, and that's it. We could have done that. But when talking about your limitations, it is good to kind of, as growing developers, it is good to think outside your comfort zone. Because if you were to work within your own comfort zone, then pretty much you're reinventing the wheel. You're already making something that you know that you can make. So we decided to kind of dip our toes into things that we don't necessarily are accustomed with, that we are not necessarily sure how to pull off. So going back into the walking simulator genre, we decided to, for concept sketch artists, we decided to, instead of hiring someone to do our work for us, we did all our research through Google Images. We just Googled things and took reference images from certain places, certain buildings. If we wanted to come up, find a design for a building, we took real life image, and that's how we kind of made our makeshift, how we kind of skimmed off the art process. And for programming, we found a visual scripting method that Unreal Engine had at the time, and we thought that for our project, it was sufficient enough for our purposes. Yes. So yes, just wanted to mention that none of us in the studio really, we were being optimistic, but just so you know. And this is our way of kind of being able to process certain things that we were unsure of and try to make a step forward. So yeah, after you kind of come up with your idea, so in this case, it is very, very important to do your research. Understand what makes a game good or bad. I guess I want to go on a tangent a little bit to talk about why it is a good investment or better investment to work on to make a good game. So, yes, recently, like, sorry. Full disclosure, when we released our game, we did zero marketing for our game. So we bombed in terms of marketing. We did everything wrong. And after kind of realizing after we released our game and we kind of looked at the do's and don'ts of marketing, we realized we did 50% of the things they told us not to do. And so, but what we were able to salvage from this big problem or dilemma that we had was that we made a good game. Good games doesn't necessarily sell, and that's the hard fact about game development. But we had a good product on our hands. And recently, Extra Credits, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that channel. It's a YouTube channel that covers a lot of things within the game industry. And they picked up our game, and we would feature on one of their videos. Fanatical also, they have a bundle called the Slayer bundle that also they picked up our game that they wanted us to put in their bundle. And this is what I mean by like having a good product is a worthy investment, because even we completely failed in terms of marketing our own game through word of mouth or through like people's reviews and people's attesting that our game is a good game. We were still able to salvage what we had, and we were still able to make a living of what we do. So yes, understanding what makes a good game. There's no technical formula to understanding this, but doing your research is very important. If you want to make platformer games, look at all the good platformer games and understand what makes it good and what makes it bad. And I'm going to explain what we did for our side. So yeah, don't be afraid to take successful elements from a game. Bad developers take only one idea, and when they release it, people call it, oh, it's just a knockoff. It is a cheap gimmick. But good developers, they steal from multiple ideas and make it something their own. It's like music. You steal other people's ideas and mix your own style and you release it. And that is I guess, as the greatest thing about indie developers, that where they can really be innovative. Take things that work, mold it together, and create something amazing for that. Do not recreate successful games. This is a very iffy topic, just because there's no, this is my opinion and from my experience. Do not recreate successful games, because if you want to make a knockoff of Mario or a platform game like Super Mario, you have to be better than that if you want your game to sell. So, what is the vision for your game? That's another question that you have to ask yourself, and understanding your vision is king to moving on with your project. Everything that you will do from now on, whether the development phase or whether marketing or creating your features, will be based on your vision for the game. Our vision for our first game, we wanted to create a detective game where the player truly feels like he or she is an investigator solving a murder mystery. Everything we did then, whether if it's changing the script or just changing certain parts of whether we had to change the style of our assets or whether we had to change the direction of the ending of the game, was based on this. And this is the thing that never will change once you decide to put your foot in it, or should never change, should I say? Okay, so these are the 3 games that were really big influence. We really influenced our direction for Painscreek Killings. So yeah. One of the things we wanted was we didn't want hand-holding in our games. We wanted no quest markers. This is very old style game design feeling. And Ether 1 actually does that really well. Has no hand-holding. Yeah. It has really great puzzle designs. But one of the flaws I felt like from this game that it had was the fact that since you were playing in kind of a dream world, there were no rules. Anything goes. And for some people, some people said that because of that reason, that sometimes the puzzles felt a little unfair because they were introduced to rules that they didn't necessarily know existed. So that's something that we were able to kind of take that point and realize, okay, this is what we can do to improve our game. Create the rules first on when you play the game. Understand where you are, understand the setting better. Gone Home. Gone Home, this is the game that we played, and after playing it, we thought, if someone can make this game, we can make it too. We love the simplistic nature of Gone Home. With very few mechanics, it told a very, very great story. And at the same time, it has apart from the controversial content at the time, we thought that this was a great model for what our game could be in terms of our very first game. Shiver, The Vanishing Hitchhiker, is a 2D point-and-click adventure game. And this is one of the games that, even though it's a 2D game, it creeped me the hell out of it. And this is something, again, that we thought, wow, they pulled off a really good atmosphere, great storytelling. How can we put that into our game too? Because what The Vanishing Hitchhiker did, and what the kind of the emotions and the kind of the fear I had playing this game, I wanted to put into my game too. And this is where you kind of have to dissect the game and understand what works and what doesn't work. There are very great reviewers out there that kind of can pull and take apart games and understand why certain designs work. But yes. Okay, next, create a proof of concept. So what a proof of concept is pretty much a small slice of your game to show and prove people that your game is possible. And that means choosing your engine. So you have to find a way to choose, you have to choose an engine that best suits your vision. Again, vision is key. Everything that you do from now on has to be fitting towards the vision. If you want to make 2D games, Unity has the best tools for sprite makers, again, I'm not familiar with the 2D side, but Unity is one of the best engines out there for mobile and 2D games. Unreal Engine has one of the best out-of-the-box tools. When you click and drag presets, the lighting looks beautiful out of the box. The shaders are much better than Unity, in my opinion, at the time. And keep in mind, this was 4 years ago when we first started. So then, the second part is also understanding the components within your game engine. Now this, I cannot stress enough how important it is to understand the components in your game engine. Because if you do not understand the components within your game engine, you are at the mercy of whatever error comes up to your screen. And this would help also with optimization, with also troubleshooting, and basically you have to be able to find a way to understand how your game engine works. So it's the same way as like kind of building a computer, I guess. If a computer doesn't work, it doesn't turn on, it can't run, it crashes, there's something inside the computer that's faulty. You could give it to someone and you could pay someone to look at your computer, or you can do it yourself and find out which part and which function within your computer does not work. And so understanding your game, understand the components is the same thing. Like, is the CPU, are you using too much CPU power? Is that why the most easiest thing to judge if your game's not working is the frame rate goes high, or it doesn't play, or certain things. But you can't just say, oh, the frame rate's high. You have to understand, are you using too much CPU power? Are you pushing the GPU power a little too much? Are you having too many triangles? Are you having too many draw calls? All these elements, all these components have to be understood when working with the game engine. Okay, and this brings up to my next point, which is be prepared to do lots and lots of testing. So for us, for our proof of concept, what we did was we kind of created a water shader, we created some foliage shaders, we created terrain, buildings, and created some sort of scene where players can just walk around, pick up items, read content, hear audio, and we realized it's possible. So basically this proof of concept is supposed to encapsulate everything that you want your game to have, and kind of prove to either your publishers, or if you're pitching to publishers, if you want other people to join, that it's possible that your idea can be pulled off. and this is a process where the developers have to really iron out all the kind of kinks of what they want in their game. Without a good proof of concept, again, you're just liable to your initial pitch, which is having something visual is very, very powerful when wanting to pitch something. Okay. Yes, so actually I want to also mention that in the end, we decided to work with the Unity engine. And actually, why did we decide to go with Unity? That's another interesting point. As I mentioned before, kind of Unreal has better out-of-the-box tools, and definitely that was, I guess, our first option when we decided what engine we wanted to use. But going back to what I said earlier about stepping out of your comfort zone, if we kind of relied on the tools for Unreal, then we're kind of limited to what the tools are able to do for us. If you want to be good developers, if you want to be able to kind of understand and learn the components of the game, start from zero. Then that's pretty much what Unity offered. It was a clean slate. So if we wanted to build a good lighting system, there are some good plugins online. But then again, you have to understand the basics of composition. I have to understand the shader technology. These are all things that we kind of thought that if we use Unreal, we wouldn't be able to fully understand ourselves, and we'll just get the generic Unreal look. So we decided to go with Unity. So we rebuilt everything from scratch, building our own shaders, and again, lots and lots of testing. We wanted, yes.
Part of the development process where you made that
Switch to.
from Unreal to Unity, like how many years have you been working in Unreal first?
We didn't start our development process with Unreal. So we were just doing testing phases and testing both engines to see which one was better for us. And yeah, just as a collective, as a team, we decided that Unity would probably be a better investment for us as developers, not necessarily for our product, for our project, but to basically understand how game engines work better, because it would force us to think outside the box. It forces us to be creative of how to tackle certain problems. So yes, that is. So then for us, Unity became kind of our main engine of how we worked and how we developed. And next, kind of goes on to that point. Plan well. So once we kind of had we were able to fulfill all our we were able to do our tech demo, be able to kind of show that okay, we can pull off a simple scene. We have an idea, we have a story, we already have everything planned. Next is to plan your entire development process. And I think this is common knowledge, but plan from general to detail. An artist can tell you exactly the same thing. Like you start with the form, and then you start to go into the details with all the eyes and the hairs. But yeah, you start with general. A famous quote that I really like is a goal without a plan is just a wish. And this is very, very relevant to game development as well. If you do not have a well thought out plan, you are going to be making mistakes after mistakes and not knowing not progressing properly. So yes, plan from general to detail. Plan your production pipeline as well. And what production pipeline is the process in which different departments within the team work together. So if you have someone who's a 3D asset, in our case, someone who's a 3D asset artist, and he has to work together with the person who's doing the scripting and combine that and put it into the scene and kind of see if everything runs well. That is the production pipeline. And that is very important because, thank you. That is very important because that determines how fast or how soon how well the project will run. So for us, we made so many problems, and this is again an iffy topic because as beginner developers, we didn't really know how to plan properly because we had no experience from understanding what works and what didn't work. And that goes beyond the last slide where it talked about lots and lots of testing, prepared to be doing lots and lots of testing. Okay, and also being that, again, this was a very, very kind of unsure unsure pipeline for us when we first started. We were always prepared to change if necessary for our next for any reason. And this is again very again iffy topic to kind of really say that this is the right way to do it, because for everybody, depending on which engine and the type of game that you're making, your pipeline, your production, your planning will be very different. For us, first of all, we started with our pre-production pipeline, which was pretty much coming up with the story, doing the tech demo, and then transitioning from the pre-production to the production phase, where we built the 3D assets. We already have like this kind of set formula where we wanted to of how the style of our objects, the style of our characters, the style of the town, and it was pretty much just grinding through that to be able to make it happen. And yeah, once you have a well thought out plan, pretty much the only thing that's left for you to do is to execute it. Again, I made it out in a very easy, like almost like, step-by-step process, but it is not. This is everything I showed here is what I would have done if I were to redo the entire project. That is completely not how we did the entire project. We made for the village that you see in our game. It took me 6 months to build a prototype. 6 months, because I really had no idea what I was doing, and it turned out that prototype could not be used for our game, and because it was way too big, and it was to be able to cover detail for the entire area was impossible with our manpower. So what I did was I scrapped it, and I had to rebuild the entire village again to be able to for the purpose of our development. And it took me about 3 weeks to build the second prototype. And that kind of shows how much time spent into learning and making mistakes during the 6 months versus if I had to do it again, it would have taken me a lot less time. So yeah, be prepared to spend 50% of your time making mistakes, failing, changing your plan if necessary. But the most important thing is don't give up, because you're still in the learning process. So yes, I'm reaching the end of my talk, so extra tips. Market your game early. I can say that from experience. Market your game early. Approach publishers if you have to. If you already have experience in marketing and you're confident, by all means go ahead. And another tip for working together as a team: have a common base for your team. I think this is important. Like, of course, the project is important, but also being able to kind of have kind of good communication, good relationship with your teammates, I think is very important. A healthy team is a happy team, and a happy team makes games faster. Yeah, and you won't know if you don't try. So this is what going back to the part where you want to go out of your comfort zone a little bit. Yeah, you don't bite more than you can chew, but at least be able to step out of your area to be able so that you're able to kind of test the waters, understand things, and get a better sense of what you do and don't know. And don't be discouraged by failures. That's I think another important thing that I learned. We spent 4 years on production for this game. If we had to redo this entire project again, we would probably finish it in about 2 years. And that means that 2 years of our time was spent making mistakes, going back to the drawing board, looking at things that didn't work, and trying to make things, find better ways to execute them. And also the fact that our plan probably wasn't in its best form at the time. But yes, definitely, if you want to get into game development, this is my experience from it, and this is something that, again, I'm only speaking from my experience. This is something that I stepped into very naively. I didn't know what to expect, but also another important thing is be prepared to work hard. If you decide to work with publishers, which is what we're doing now, you are working with a deadline. You're working towards a deadline with them, and that means that you're going to have to be able to kind of even lose some couple hours in sleep to be able to pull off the project. And that for me was a very big wake up call for me, because I was such a lazy student. I did not get good grades, but working with a team like this allowed me to be able to think publicly, be able to live from, again, have better communication with my team, be able to become a better person myself. So, yeah, definitely don't give up. Don't be discouraged by failures. And if you don't know anything, try it out. That's all I can say. Yeah, thanks for listening. That is pretty much. Oh yeah. You guys have any questions?
Yeah, so we do want to take questions, but we have to get out of here at 8, so it's 10 till. Yeah, so you can ask you asked a few questions real quick right now, but we need to generally start packing up.
Hello. Hey, great talk.
Thank you.
So, a question for you about testing. So, how did you handle testing? Was it all done in-house, or did you have external areas where you did game testing to make sure that it was all polished and ready to go?
Thank you. I just want to repeat your question. How did we do our testing?
Yeah, was it all done in-house, or did you, just to make sure that the game is playing exactly the way you want it to, or did you go out and also do testing other places?
For our case, we did everything in-house. Yeah, including even when we did our first alpha and beta tests, I think that was all in-house too. We just gathered friends and other people that we knew were gamers and had them test our game. Yeah, we didn't. I think this was kind of kind of showed on a little bit how we didn't really network properly. I think that was. I think Larry mentioned that really well. It's like put yourself out there in terms of people, and that's something that we didn't do. We worked everything in-house. For all we know, since we worked with friends, they could have just said our game was really great. But I would definitely recommend getting feedback from other people as well. But yeah, we did everything in-house.
Yes.
So I guess this is probably the last question because of time, but I have a bunch of questions. Great. Well, number one is I'll limit it to 3. How many people were on the team, and did you guys work remotely or in person at times? And the final question is, are you guys working on something now?
Yes. Okay, so for the first question, we originally had, when we started the production, I guess the pre-production, there was only 4 people, but eventually our team right now currently is 7 people. Yeah, I think as the development process kind of went through, some people left, some people came, but generally a good 5 people working on the team. I'm sorry, on the game. Yes, we are working on something right now. I'm not allowed to disclose that too much, but yes, we are working on something. What he said.